Okay, today we'll hear a talk on step 10, which is continue to take personal inventory and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Please give a warm welcome to Pat O from Fullerton, California. Welcome, Pat.
Hello, friends. My name is Pat. I'm an alcoholic. Grateful to be sober. Grateful to be here. Good to see so many friends on here. Uh, I don't know, man. It's interesting. The Zoom world and all. It's interesting to me because I get on. I'm like, have you been here before? I'm like, in my head, I'm thinking, yeah, I've been here before. I'm real surprised I'm being asked to come back. Then all of a sudden, like I have all these friends. I'm like, oh my God, like people are here, and then I'm like, maybe you are loved, and then my head's like, well, not really. You probably should just cancel out the meeting and just let them know that you're a real loser. And then it's like, yeah, and then it's just my heart's filled that I have people in my life that love me. Like wow, like it makes me just grateful. It makes me grateful for the life that Alcoholics Anonymous has given me. And step 10, I seem to be getting this step quite a bit, and it's pretty cool. It's like actively in my life, and I'm gonna talk about that. And it's kind of some might have heard the example, but I just took me and my son's mom took him to college this weekend, and so there's that, and we'll talk about that. But I'm just gonna read it because everything else other than that's gonna be my experience. So this thought brings us to step 10, which suggests we continue to take personal inventory and to continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along. It's telling me I'm going to be making some mistakes. That's a good thing, you know. I got sober. I thought I was supposed to be perfect. I thought maybe when I had 20 years, I'd kind of float on by, and never make mistakes. I thought I was going to reach this pinnacle. Well, that's not the case. I make more mistakes today. Well, maybe I'm just aware of them, but we vigorously commenced this way of living as we cleaned up the past. I have one amends that just popped up. So I got to clean that up from back when I was, just came up. A guy reached out. He's like, yo, you owe me money. I'm thinking, oh, well, I know today. I'm like, I was in a blackout. So I told him I was in a blackout. How much do I owe you? And he let me know. And I just said, okay, and so I'm continuing to live this way of life as these things come back up. It says we have entered the world of the spirit, and I have a little sidebar that says this is a fact whether you believe it or not. Our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. This is not an overnight matter. It should continue for a lifetime. So really simple directions. Continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. When these crop up, we ask God at once to remove them. We discuss them with someone immediately and we make amends quickly if we've harmed anyone. Then we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help. Love and tolerance of others is our code. And I have a little sidebar. It says steps do not take us to perfection, it takes us to an awakening. And we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. For by this time, sanity will have returned. That's a great promise. We will seldom be interested in liquor. If tempted, we recoil from it as a hot flame. We react sanely and normally, and we will find that this has happened automatically. We will see that our new attitude toward liquor has been given us with any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. That is the miracle of it. We are not fighting it, neither are we avoiding temptation. We feel as though we've been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. We have not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. It does not exist for us. Neither are we cocky nor are we afraid. That is our experience. That is how we react so long as we keep in fit spiritual condition. It is easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. We are headed for trouble if we do. For alcohol is a subtle foe. We're not cured of alcoholism. What we really have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. Every day is a day when we must carry the vision of God's will into all of our activities. How can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. These are thoughts which must go with us constantly. We can exercise our willpower along this line all we wish. It is the proper use of the will. Much has already been said about receiving strength inspiration and direction from him who has all knowledge and power. If we have carefully followed directions, we have begun to sense the flow of the Spirit into us. To some extent, we have become God consciousness. We have begun to develop this vital sixth sense, but it must go further, and that means more action. And I was getting choked up reading this reading. I was like, I had a moment this weekend where I was in that space, and it just, I'm a alcoholic of the agnostic temperament. I, I have a deep, profound relationship with God that comes and goes. I was in meditation this morning and I was like, woo, I was like feeling it. And then I like got out of my room and I was like, oh my God, like I just got overwhelmed with all this like nonsense that my mind creates and it separates me from God that fast. And this step is one of those steps or is the step for me that really connects me back to me, right? It connects me back to the spirit in me and it connects me to God. And I come into the room today and I get honest and I get connected with you. I when I got sober on the 23rd of October of 2002, I came in with not much life skills. I came in off a Skid Row. I hadn't showered in 6 months. The physical stuff was unmanageable. And I had a sponsor who was really really clear about like brush your teeth every morning. And then he's like, yeah, brush your teeth tonight. That might be a good idea too. And I'm like, wow, that was like, wow, that was profound. I didn't know you do things like that. He's like, have you drank water? I'm like, yeah, probably not for a month. He's like, yeah, that's not healthy. You probably should drink water every day. And so those like little things, right, like from the physical space, kind of came together pretty fast. But for me, the unmanageability on 52, where it talks about having trouble with personal relationships, can't control your emotional nature, prey to misery and depression, those types of things were the unmanageability created by this nonsense in the head, and I didn't really understand that for such a long time, and I was a few years sober and I finally got a girlfriend. I don't know if I got a girlfriend, but something happened, and it was, something happened and those newly sober relationships where well, for me, where um, I get afraid, so I break up with them, and then I get alone, and then I get lonely, so hey, how's it going? Just checking in, and now we're back in a relationship, and then I get afraid 30 days later and I break up. And so I'm in one of these types of deals, and you know, and so I ended up breaking up with her. But for me, right, the guy with the unmanageable life ventures out into other worlds, right? Because I need to be loved and I need to be feel valued by somebody. And so I get myself in a lot of trouble in the relationship department. And one of these bounce back and forth deals, she ended up getting pregnant and deciding to keep the kid. But just because I'm gonna have or she's gonna have my child doesn't mean that this behavior stops, right? You think, oh, I'm gonna be a dad. The right thing to do is you show up and you be and I tried. I really did try. I showed up and I ended all the things and there was an amends made by one of them that to my son's mom, and that wasn't good, and it ended, the relationship ended. And you would think, wow, Pat, that's some real heavy things. You should probably stop. Now, this isn't an active time when I'm like not participating in step 10. I'm doing a lot of step 1 and a lot of step 12. I'm sponsoring a lot of guys. I'm really busy in Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't really understand what I believe to be the program of Alcoholics Anonymous laid out in the first 164 pages. I had a sponsor that was big about get out of self, help others. You know what I mean? Like, you're having a hard time, go help a guy. And I'm reading the book, and I have a ninth grade education. I was talking to someone recently. I was like, I don't think I really comprehended this book until like I like maybe, I don't know, read it 500 times with guys I sponsored. All of a sudden I was like, oh my God, wow, this is profound book in here. I didn't, but I kept taking the action, and so yeah, so I'm in this bounce back and deal, and I'm not working, I'm not doing this. I'm reading it and I'm teaching it, I guess, but not really getting it. And I'm doing this thing back and forth, and I'm, just living on fear, and I don't have a God in my life, and 8 years sober, I'm going to kill myself, not practicing the program of Alcoholics Anonymous laid out in the book. And I met a man who talked to me about untreated alcoholism, and so basically when my son was 2 years old, that relationship ended, and I'm giving some context to the step 10, and from 2 years old, I took care of that little boy. I was a student. I was a loser, really. I washed windows for some side hustle because that's what I did when I was out there. I was a DJ, so but I started going to school, and I took care of my son, while his mom worked, and that relationship ended at 2 years, and we did the best we could. We co-parented, and I went to AA, and I did too much AA, so she didn't like that, and whatever, and 8 years sober, I'm going to kill myself. I went back through the steps. I had a profound change inside of me, and I started to apply the 10th step to my life. And I don't think like physically, I was like, okay, you got to practice step 10. Just things started flowing. And what happened was I had entered the world of the spirit, right? Which is sounds really nice, but it's really painful, right? Because that God consciousness is, I'm very aware of things that I'm doing. Like I can no longer, like, I live in fear, right? And I notice the fear, and the action that I take to cover up that fear is like way too painful, right? The road seems to get narrower, though we're on the broad highway, right? And so I can't create the pain that I'm in. And so let's fast forward that son, on his own, on accord, let me back up and talk about him a little bit. So when I be in this untreated alcoholism phase, he would go to his mom's house for whatever 5 days, and he would come to my house for three, and then we did this 5-3-3-5 thing, and his attitude was a little, you know what I mean? Like, yo, like you can't talk to me like that. But I don't like, I'm not, I get afraid, and so I react. And when he was about 14 years old, and he gave me attitude one day coming home from his mom's house, and I was in a fearful spot, when his attitude popped up, and I said to him, I said, "You better shut your effing mouth, or I'll take you outside and beat your right." And and I was like completely aware, right, that I was in fear and just reacted in anger. And I was like thrown back, and I removed myself from where I was, and I went in the back, and it said that says in there, continue to watch for selfishness, resentment, and fear. And I got into some prayer, and the next thing it says to talk to somebody about it, and I called my sponsor, Mike, and Mike said, yeah, you owe him an amends. And so I went, and I said, hey, I said, Eden, I said, you think we can go outside, and I got to make an amends? And he looked at me, and he said, no, I don't want to hear your amends. He was 14 years old. He understands that men made plenty of apologies to him. He said, I don't want to hear your amends. And I said, when you're ready, let me know, because I would love to talk with you. And I called a guy a sponsor. I didn't wait for anyone to call me. I called a guy that was like, about to go to prison. He was looking at like 23 years in prison. He was going to court the next day. Hey, how you doing? And he let me know how afraid he was, and things that he was going through. And it was like, did it make everything better? No, but it like eased that space that I was in. Right. It took me out of self long enough for me to get present within his world, and to see that, what, I wasn't the only one that was afraid. Right. And because my alcoholism separates me and makes me think that I'm the only one, like when I came on and talked about how no, I wasn't loved, and no one likes me, and all my friends are here. Like I saw you all like, yeah, bobbing your head, like I get it, and then it was like an hour later, and he said, Dad, he said, I'm willing to hear your amends. And so we went on a walk, and I was like, I apologize, man. I said, I was afraid, and I reacted in anger. And, I said, when I was 14 years old and had uh attitude toward my mom, right? Like at that point I was using a lot of drugs and I was, getting kicked out of school in the ninth grade and he looked at me, he said, Dad, he said, I'm not like you. He said, I have two loving parents that love and support me. He said, I'm a straight A student, and I'm thinking, I'm like this big, I'm thinking, yeah, you're a real loser. And he said, I've never seen you react in that fear or that anger, and I've never been afraid of you until today, you know. And I was like, whoo. I said, what could I do, to make this right? And he said, if you could never treat me like that again. And And I said, "Yes, sir." And I went about my business. He was 14. Fast forward for I don't know when high school ended last year. He graduated with 4.5, I think, grade point average. I didn't know you can get a 4.5. I asked him, I was like, how'd you do that? And there's things called honors classes or APs or something. And he got into the leading college, Fashion Institute Technology in New York for a fashion and design major, all on his own with no education around designing things. He sewed three outfits, full on suit, all these things. I had to be I was the model, and so that was cool. And so that's like an active 10th step, and a changed behavior, like went to go look at one school, Parsons here in LA, which I want him to go to. You know what I mean? LA is an hour away. That's easy. If things go bad, I can drive an hour. I can still have my daily relationship with him where we're buds and we're pals, and me and his mom go and me and his mom at this point we did great job. This kid's 18, he's going to college, he's co-parented. We did a great job, but there's stuff there. You know what I mean? She has a fiance now. We're not as close as we used to. But I'm afraid my kid's going to college. I'm so self-centered. I don't realize that she's probably afraid. I think should just be 100%. And I don't realize this. So we go and I don't realize that I'm afraid, and I don't realize that I'm manipulating at the time. But I'm like trying to convince them both that this is the school we should go to, and Fit hasn't really sent us anything back. So we should just probably just accept that this is where you're going. And she's coming from her space and her opinion and her thoughts of supporting her child. But I have this old idea that she doesn't really know. She's a bad parent. She didn't really show up the way I think she should. And I don't really know that I have all this underneath. And so and she's in the back seat of my car and we're driving home and I'm, trying to control the conversation. And she just rolls her eyes in the back seat. I look at her in my rearview mirror and she just rolls her eyes at me every time I talk. And the first time it happened, I'm like, okay, God, I would like to pray for Lindy, and I just ask that you give her the strength that she needs. And then, back at the conversation, and she threw an eye roll again, and that second eye roll, not good. And I said, you need to F and grow the F up, and you should probably ask for help. And immediately, right, I was like, oh my God, immediately. I was like, oh my God, what did I just do? And I can't believe I just reacted that way. And oh my God, like I was internally just like really like having a hard time. And an active step 10 would be continue to watch for these things, right? Pray, talk to somebody about it, and make amends promptly. Promptly. That means like probably right now in the car. But no, Pato's not going to do that. And so I drop her off at home. Everyone's crying, you know, everyone's crying. I'm crying. She's crying. My son's crying. Made for real awkward, last 10 minutes home. So we get home. I had said some prayers in the car. I call my sponsor, and talk about it, and I turn my attention to who I can help, and I get actively busy working with guys. Thank God that the 12 steps says we tried, because I'm putting my hand out all the time. I'm trying all the time. I'm not trying to get a sponsee. I'm just trying to be helpful to somebody. I'm trying to just let people welcome them. When I go to the grocery store, I try to be kind to others, hey, let me help you with your groceries, those kind of things. And so I know I need to make this amends, but do I make it promptly? No, I wait like 3 weeks and torment myself. You know what I mean? Because my pride is like not going to do it. And so I finally made the amends, and she let me really know clearly, like, you're the one that needs to grow up. And she didn't really, that's how I heard it. It wasn't really the case. But I said, you know what? We talked about her fear, and we talked about, like, got real connected about like our own individual fears about our kid going to college. And I opened up to her about my fear, and she opened up to me about her fear, and I immediately had compassion for another human being. I probably could have just done that from the beginning, like said, hey, I'm really afraid my kid's going to college, and like been open with her, and it probably would have been a different ball game. And so now we're going to Long Beach college to go to the second school he got accepted into. And and I'm prayed up. I got the spiritual armor on, dude. I'm like, all right, we're ready to go. And I know I'm afraid, and I know she's afraid. And we get there, and I say some things, and she did an eye roll. Oh, I'm like, she didn't change, right? She didn't change. She still did the old eye roll. And I was like, you know what, God, thank you for this opportunity that I get to grow spiritually. And I thought, where'd that prayer come from? Because I'm never really excited about growing spiritually, And but I did. I said, thank you for allowing me to grow spiritually, and just give me the strength, to be loving and compassionate. And now this is what happens is I separate myself, I don't like, and I separate myself for a long period of time, and I don't realize that this is punishing them. I don't realize that this is causing harm, but I got through it, and I was like, dude, you got through it and you don't know an amends. That's great. And fast forward, we go to orientation in New York, and I got my spiritual armor on. Now we're sharing a 1 bedroom bunk bed, twin bed together, Airbnb. And I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy. I'm spiritually armored. She's still rolling her eyes. She's still like, huffing and puffing. And I'm sitting in orientation, and I come and I'm sitting there with my son, and I look at him, and he's crying, and his mom's crying. And I had a deep knowing, right? Knowing that New York fit college was where my son was supposed to be, regardless of what anything was going on. And I was like, whoo, bro. I was like, I could feel the power of God, right? This agnostic temperament felt the power of God. And I was like, wow. And we got done, and I said, I looked at my son, I said, this is I believe, and dude, this is exactly where you're supposed to be. And I got through it, but I got through it by separating myself from them for periods of time. And my son came to me, he said, Dad, he said, when you separate yourself from us, it feels like you're punishing us. And I was like, oh, I didn't, okay. What can I do differently? And he said, be engaging. I know you're having a hard time. I know you're scared. I know you and mom have your stuff, but can you like be kind and be engaging? And I said I could do that. And and my son's been one of my greatest teachers, really. And so this last weekend we went off to Fit College to drop my son off at in New York. However, I think it's like 5,000 miles. I don't know. I exaggerate. Maybe it's only 45, but extra 500 seems like a lot more. And and we go off to New York, and it was a hard 3 weeks before. It was tough, man. It was like I felt like I was letting my little boy go. And well, actually, I was. It's a spiritual transformation from that little boy into a man. Something I never experienced before, with my father, and and this time, and it was different, right? This time, it was about me sharing my thoughts and my feelings in a vulnerable space of letting my son, letting his mom, letting the people around me know that I'm afraid, and opening my heart, allowing the spirit of me to connect to the spirit in you. And I could come to a meeting and do it here, and to start to practice that and do it within my relationships around me was a different ball game. And there was a lot of, when my mom died, I remember when my mom died and I was like, looked in the sky and like, if God's in the sky. But I don't know, this was like, man, I'm an orphan. You know what I mean? Like I have nobody, like I have no immediate family. Like my dad, I had found my dad's family, and my dad had died in 1990. When my mom had said, I'm an only child. And I realized I was like, the family that I have, I said, you have Eden, you know. And now I'm sitting here and my son's leaving to college, but I'm like a worst case scenario guy. I'm losing my son. He's gonna turn his back on me like everybody else did. He's gonna leave me like everybody else left me, right? That same mind, that same fearful space. And he unpacked all the stuff in my house to take, and he said, "This is heavy, Dad." And I was like, "This is really heavy." Here the mind is telling me that you're going to be alone. And my son's like, has his feelings too. And he's telling me he's sad that he's not going to hang out every day. And then he shares with me how he's excited about this new journey and how our relationship's going to grow and change and be better. I'm thinking, dude, this kid, bro, like, where do you come from? You know? And I was able to share with him like this deep, like, sense of like fear. And so we get to fit, and now I got all kinds of marching orders, right? To be loving, to be engaging, to be participating, to be, right, from all the mistakes that I made through it. And I show up and I got the spiritual armor on and I'm ready to go. And she's still eye rolling and she's still manipulating the situation and she's still controlling and she's still doing everything. And I am praying. I'm answering the some calls are coming. I'm talking to some guys. I'm talking to my sponsor. I'm engaging in the family, and we go do all these fun things. Went to the Queen Zoo, went to the Mets game, went to Cabaret. We're just enjoying it. Sunday, we got all the things, and uh and I would separate myself, say a prayer, come back in the family to be of love and service. Separate myself, say a prayer, call my sponsor, come back in the family, be love and service, right? Not punishing them, right? Not like let me show you, let me let you know that I'm angry and I'm mad and have you wonder what's going on with me. And whatever she did was not, you know what? It was none of my business. You know what I mean? My business is how I'm treating God's kids, and how am I being an example to my son? And she did the exact same thing, and she did that she always did. And I separated myself, and my son was clearly affected, and I was clearly affected. And I looked at my son, I said, let's not forget to pray. And we said some prayers, and he talked about his frustration and he talked about his sadness. He's like, I feel like I'm gonna lose my mom, the relationship with my mom, and we talked it through, and he called his roommate because his uncle picked him up, drove from Maryland to Ohio to New York to drop his nephew off, and literally stayed for like 30 minutes. And his roommate had expressed that he was having a hard time because he was in college by himself. And so my son called his roommate, you know what I mean? And I called the guy, and we went back like a couple minutes, and we were just of love and service to his mom, and we went to rice pudding place and she didn't want to eat it, and we were joking around like, you got to eat the rice pudding, and next thing you know, we're all laughing, and I was just like sitting there and I was just blown away, I mean, I was like I felt like I was it wasn't even a feeling. Like I was like God had graced me. God had given me the gift of courage, right? God had, I like was like overwhelmed with just like with like the love of God in my life. Like I was like, God is doing all of this because on my own power, dude, I'll blow the whole thing up. You know, on my own power, I'd get my son kicked out of school, and moved over to LA because of my fear and my garbage, and my and stuck and I gave my son a hug when I left, and he texted me and he said he just thanked me for the opportunity. He's like, thank you, Dad, for the opportunity. And I don't know how it's going to work out. You know what I mean? Like, it's a lot of money. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know how it's going to work out. Right. But I trust and believe. Right. I trust and believed in you. Right. You guys came to AA and you shared your fears and you shared your insecurities and you shared your things with me. And you gave me hope. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, I hope that I could be like Steve one day. You know what I mean? Like, I hope that I could be like Ralph one day. Like I hope that I could be, right? And I'm sitting in New York, right? And I'm like, "Oh my God, like I feel exactly what you guys have been talking about for all these years." Right? I actually was like, "Oh my God, like I truly felt like I was one of God's kids." Right? Not like an intellectual place of like, this is what you do, this is the format, this is what we do, and when we do we are done, done. No, it was like a lot of just be I was just in the moment, just, oh my God, God has given me this, right? This is a gift from God, and I'm so grateful that you guys didn't like push and pressure me about God. You just shared your experiences and you just shared with me how God worked in your life. And even though for 8 years I didn't believe in God and I was pretty much pretty atheist, I would argue and just battle about how like you were wrong. I mean, I was sitting in a third day with me. Topic was on third step the other day, discussion meeting, which I'm not, anyways. But I was like picking apart everyone's God's will. You know what I mean? God's will. I'm like, oh yeah, how do you know what God's will is? And I'm picking everything apart. And I got to the end of the meeting and just realized, I just realized that each situation that I get to be in, like I get to practice the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I believe that that's where God wants me to be, right? God presents these things in my life. I don't know how much longer I got to talk. I don't know where the timer lady is. Is it time already? Too
Yeah,
much? Oh
it
my
is
God.
time.
You guys should have shut me up. All right. Well, I went over. I apologize, and I'll call my sponsor. Mike, are you there? I went over. Sorry. And so I make amends. Please forgive me. I'm going to help some people. I love you all. Thanks.
Oh, thank you so much, Pat. That was beautiful. You could have